of racism and sexism, homophobia, tombs of violence. We live in one of the most violent societies on the face of the earth. That's one heck of a tomb for any of us to try and find our way out. Tombs prepared by others because of social expectations. The closet is a tomb. There are all sorts of tombs we find ourselves in from time to time in our lives that we could simply ignore, continue to be wrapped in death as Lazarus was in that tomb, or we can listen to the voice that calls us out. And of course, whenever we find ourselves in such tombs, that's exactly what is happening in our faith. That's why we gather here on Sundays. That's why we live our own spirituality, because you and I know that the God of hope is always there calling us out of those things that keep us bound. But I want to pay some attention to the second thing that Jesus says as well. Because you can imagine Jesus standing there and saying, Lazarus, come out. And here's this guy, mummified basically from head to toe. Try walking in that. Try getting up from the shelf that they put you on. It must have been an interesting experience just to watch. That's why I said think of Lon Chaney or The Bride of Frankenstein or something like that. And as Lazarus appears in the opening of the tomb, and Jesus is standing before him, and the stench is pretty obvious, Jesus looks around at the crowd and says, unbind him and set him free. Unbind him and set him free. I think that's the most overlooked statement in the entire story. We tend to think of this as a story of Jesus raising someone up. Look at the power of Jesus. He raised Lazarus from the dead. Yes. But what good is Lazarus to anybody, including himself, bound as he is in the wrappings of death? Where is he going to go, wrapped from head to toe like someone who still belongs in the grave? And it is not Jesus that frees Lazarus. Jesus gives him life. It is the crowd that has to free him. And that, I think, is the key that unlocks the passage for us. At least it does for me. Stop and think. Lazarus is raised from death. He's stinking. He's still bound from head to toe. He's hardly free to be who he's meant to be. The crowd is recoiling with the stench, thinking of his sister's words just a few minutes ago. But the resurrection is not really complete, is it? Because Lazarus is not even free to take the next step. And Jesus, instead of doing it himself, invites the two sisters and the rest of the crowd to begin unwrapping the clothing of death. You see, the raising of Lazarus is not just about the raising of Lazarus, but the freeing of Lazarus. And the freeing of Lazarus happens with Mary and Martha and the crowd. And for a resurrection event to happen in your life and mine, it not only requires us to listen to that voice outside of our graves, outside of our tombs, outside of those things that keep us down, calling us to come out. It is also that loving action that allows us to be free. Freeing Lazarus is the task of that crowd, is the task of every one of us. And freeing Lazarus, we begin to discover, I think, that we will be freeing ourselves. Jesus may call us to life, but you and I often find ourselves still wrapped in the clothing of death, anxieties and fears, resentments, insecurities. Sometimes we need to learn to love it. Jesus may call us to life, but we are still bound because of the context of our own situation. We may be breathing, but like Lazarus, we're not really walking like three people. We're like hopping around or hobbling from place to place. It's only when we turn to each other and help peel off the clothing of death, help one another become free, help one another take the next step, help one another come out of that tomb, wherever it is. It's only then that we really see the power of resurrection. Jesus stands before us and calls us to come forward, to come out, to come to life. But he has also given us one another so that we can truly find freedom in the relationships that he places us in with one another. Freeing Lazarus happens every time we help to free another person from some little thing. Every time an act of kindness, an act of compassion, an act of faith, an act of hope, an act of care or concern. That is how we free Lazarus. And in freeing Lazarus, we not only free Lazarus, we free ourselves. And as Jesus said to Lazarus' sister, when that happens, we will see the glory of God. Amen.